So first of all, I'd asked this question already. How many non-attorneys in the room besides Jane? Okay, I hope you guys don't get bored out of your mind at this presentation because it literally is searching basics for attorneys. However, we'll try to keep it fun. With that, let me tell you about the mobile app. I hope you have that.
Oh, yes.
Very important. And we will not be sitting on those bar stools, but if someone gives us trouble, Jane, I'm looking at you, we'll make you come up here and answer questions. All right, with that said, my name is Niloy Ray. That's me in a very much younger time and happier frame of mind. No, I'm kidding. I'm one of the e-discovery council at Littler Mendelson. We're a 1,300 strong labor and employment law firm based everywhere and nowhere. We have 72 offices. Is that right, Jane? Do we have 72? 72. And for the last, going on 7 years now, my practice is focused on simplifying and essentially, as far as possible, eliminating e-discovery, which you might think is funny given my title. But this topic particularly is one that's near and dear to my heart because I think that a lot of attorneys, and Stan, you'll tell us about yourself in a second, but my principle here is a lot of attorneys, myself included, come into this search world not really understanding the tools or how to use them, but knowing somehow or expecting that one has to have some basic ability with it. And that creates a really difficult situation where without capable trainers, like my trainer sitting right in front here, you actually create more harm than good in a well-meaning effort to do your job as a zealous advocate who is technologically competent, Model Rule 1.06. But with that said, Stan, go ahead, tell us who you are.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Niloy. I'm Stan Pearson, and I'm a member of the solutions team here at Relativity. This is our base for 3 or 4 days. And I've been with Relativity now for 3.5 years. Practiced law for a while, many moons ago, and then I got into the e-discovery world and did a lot of time managing some big reviews. And this sounded like a great session to do with Niloy. Like he was saying, this is something that I think attorneys, especially when they start learning about e-discovery, don't really understand anything about searching. Right? And we don't learn anything about e-discovery tools in law school, at least when we went to law school.
Don't really learn much at law school, right?
We didn't learn much about the business part. But now, thanks to people like our Janice Holman at Relativity, who's doing a lot of outreach to law schools, I've had the opportunity to go and speak at a lot of law schools. And there are schools that are focusing on how to use tools, not just Relativity, of course, but all the tools that are available and what they can expect when they get out of law school. So that's really nice to see. So what we want to talk about today on our agenda is we're calling this the nuances of search, also known as what's wrong with this picture. We're going to go through some scenarios of searching, some common misconceptions, things that you can take with you to get over those misconceptions, and then, of course, a life beyond keywords. What do you do with all this data, metadata, or information that you have? How do you get through it and prioritize your documents based on that? And then we're going to go beyond the obvious and talk about the benefits of analytic searching. There are a lot of good tools, especially in Relativity, of course, for using analytics to cull your data or to find exactly what you're looking for in a particular matter. All right?
So let's talk about the nuances of search. And again, just to reiterate what Stan said, we start with keywords because that's sort of the simplest Duplo block of our search approaches as we're in law school and as we get out into the e-discovery world, right? We've all done Lexis searches. We've all done Google searches. We've all heard the word Boolean and wondered whether that B should be capitalized. Yes, it should, but that's not the point. The point is we think we have some facility. I know I thought I had some facility with keyword search coming out of law school, and that typically is where we all start. So let's take a look at this. This is a keyword. This is a search. Let's say the case involves, for some reason, emails, documents, etc., that refer to third-party contracts, agreements, clauses, what have you. You can imagine scenarios where this phrase matters. What's wrong with this picture? If I'm looking for every reference to third-party, or whatever, content in my data set, And those of you who are ringers in here, Mr. Ball, I'm looking at you because I know you know the answer to this and will tell me what I get wrong. Don't answer. What's missing here? Why is this ineffective as a search term? I'm telling you it's ineffective. Anyone have any idea why it's ineffective? Why it won't every time and only bring back records that have the phrase third party in them? Sorry? There's no connector. What kind of connector would be put in here? Oh, darn. There will be law and technology beyond here. But I'm not going to pick on you. Anyone else? What's wrong with this? If I just type this into into some sort of search tool, why is this guy in the suit saying that this is not effective? Yes? Doesn't have quotation marks. So what would happen if I type this in without quotation marks? Some as an or, some as an and. So about, oh, God, I'm going to date myself, 15 years ago or so, Lexis and Westlaw treated these spaces, the space between the word third and party, as an and or an or. So in one system, you type that in, and you'd get every document that had the words third and party, and in some, you'd get the ones that had third or party. And I'm sure you got lots of great documents about great parties that happen on the third floor, but that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for third party, right? What else is wrong with this? What about the capitalization? Do you think that matters? See this all the time. I see search terms that have been devised by attorneys, and brief frolic and detour. Oftentimes, as e-discovery counsel and as technologists, we're given a set of search terms. Have you ever done that? Have you ever handed a set of search terms to a technologist and said, well, here you go. We've come up with these, or the other side's proposed these. Just run them and tell me how many hits this, tell me how much it's going to cost to review whatever this comes up with, right? That's sort of where I'm going with this. We have to know how these tools work so that we can be intelligent ex ante about how we write these, so that we don't agree to something that's going to be disproportionately burdensome. So what about those capital letters? Do those matter? Anyone know of a search engine where, Stan, do you know of a search engine where capital letters are indexed separately from lowercase letters?
I do not.
So does it matter then if I have capital letters up here?
No.
Is it misleading? Would someone think, oh, if you capitalize a word, then you're only going to find hits where that capital is in that position? Possibly.
No, maybe they think it's just more important if you capitalize them.
Oh, well, yes, this is true. So, yes, you put quotation marks around this, however, and this is probably, if there's one tip you can take away from here that you haven't heard before, put quotation marks around your phrases. If you're looking for exactly those letters and that space in that sequence, put quotation marks around it, and you will be so much better off.
Now, we're going to get to a time in a minute where quotation marks really, really matter when it comes to the connectors, but go ahead, we're going to get there.
So how about this? Looks pretty good, right? Agreed? No capitalization, quotation marks. What's wrong with this one? Yeah, Mr. Ball, sir, I know you know. Anyone else? Yes. The same thing, it's redundant. Most systems, DT search included, don't treat a hyphen any different than a space. So in other words, when the system is being, when the data are being indexed and when every word is being read by the system and assigned, or its position is being noted on every document, those two are exactly the same thing. So it's a lot more words for the same effect. So you don't need that. Now, the question this raises, do you have a question?
Yeah, I would add that you don't need to put, like, if you use third-party, it doesn't exactly.
Right, but you don't know that for all search engines.
Right.
And that's why being explicit, which is what that is always better than expecting that the implicit logic will always be the same.
Yeah.
So
he's right there. That's a really good point to make. In the DT search engine, which most of these things we really want to talk about in terms of DT search, because keyword search is not quite as effective if you're looking for something specific. So the quotes certainly don't hurt, but they're not absolutely necessary in the DT search.
Right. The other thing you'll find when you use quotes and parentheses and so forth is that the more of those you structure into your searches, the easier your searches are to read. And so when you're trying to figure out the logic of what you've put down and what someone else has put down, putting in these explicit delimiters like quotes or parentheses really helps. Also, and this is just a personal note from years in software, always capitalize your connectors. So you notice how the or is capitalized here? That always makes it easier for whoever's reading it to understand whether you mean a logical operation or you actually mean the word or. So since case doesn't matter for search terms, capitalization for connectors is always a good idea. All right, how about this? Let's go back here for a second and think about what we were missing, right? We didn't have third up there. We had third, the word, but how about this one, Stan? What do you think? Does that bring in something that the others don't? Or is it surplusage?
No, it does. It brings in something the others don't. And sometimes I think it's just something you should think about. If you're running multiple terms, you have to think about the variations. And we're going to talk later about how to find the variations that you didn't consider. But here, you probably would consider that, right? And
so do all numbers show up the same in DT search?
Well,
if I put fourth or fifth or sixth?
It normalizes. So it just makes it's going to be a word. 3RD is a word. It's going to look for that word. So in this instance, you probably want to search for the word third as well as the number RD for those times that it might appear either way.
How about the superscript? Does that matter?
No.
Right. That's a typo. It shouldn't really have a superscript on it. Okay, here's a set that I see all the time. Well, the second one's one I see all the time. The first one's another one that I grabbed from one of my cases. So let's look at the one up top. Food and drug or food ampersand drug. What do we think of that? Anyone think the ampersand is doing anything in there? Anyone think it's not doing anything in there? Yes.
We'll
could you
call
speak
it
up?
DT search.
If it's DT search, then I believe that the ampersand will be
So
It's
tell
treated
us about noise.
Well, in this case, it's the same as the hyphen. So the ampersand is just a space, which is different from noise words, and we're going to talk about noise words in a minute and define those a little bit more. But here, the ampersand is just the same as when we saw third party with the hyphen. That's what this does. Now, the food and drug phrase, however, in the quotes, you're probably going to talk about that.
Go ahead.
Or maybe we should ask, what do you think? What happens when you add the and in there in food and drug, the word and, not the ampersand?
Yeah, notice it's not capitalized, but does it matter? Is it treated as an operator, as something that's going to try and, capitalize the word food, or is it a noise word? So?
It's a noise word.
What's a noise word?
But here, this is going to look for the phrase food and drug, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit later about changing your noise word list, and we'll talk about ways to do that. But
so let's just tell everyone what noise words are, just so we can preview that. Go ahead.
Noise words and stop words, kind of the same thing. Those two terms are interchangeable, and they are a list of, in any language, whatever index whatever language your index is built on, there's a list of noise words or stop words. And those are the words that are ignored by that index. They are not indexed. So when it pulls all the words out of the document to place it into the index, that's the group of words you're searching on, those words are ignored. So if a word is...
Basically, think about commonly used words that the system expects will proliferate all over the documents you have and probably not move the ball much in terms of substance, like the word the,
right,
or the word and, or the word or. There are two different reasons that you don't note the positions of those words on these documents. One, because they won't substantively move anything forward, typically, unless you're a fan of the word, or unless you're looking for the band the, I figure the is not going to really move the ball forward. Or there might be a different meaning that those terms have, like or and have logical meanings, and therefore they may not be part of the index, so as to, in simpler systems, prevent confusion between which of those two you mean. Now, the one below that, over time, I have that up there because it was about 6 years ago I got that as in a series of search terms in a wage and hour class action. And that thing returned, that search returned 80% of the records. In other words, we had, let's say, 3 million, 5 million, who knows how many million emails and attachments. We ran overtime. Overtime showed up in 80% of those. And given that this was a case about overtime violations, that was concerning, right? Any kind of discussion of the legal issue at hand can be concerning if there's that large volume of it. But then we discovered that in the particular index we were using, and this is why it matters that you know what your noise and stop words are, over was a stop word. So in other words, every time the system looked at that, all it was looking for was the word time. And time shows up a lot on a lot of emails. And so I guess not knowing what your stop words are can create issues with the search terms you create. On the other hand, if you see hit reports and hit results where you get, insane numbers like that, you can revisit and check to see what your stop words might be and see if one of those terms, in this case, over in our system, was a stop word. How do you fix that? There are two ways to fix it, right? One is to eliminate that search. That's easy, but that's never the ideal choice. The other thing, and this is complicated, is you have to rebuild the index. In other words, you've got to revise that list of stop words, take the word over out of it, literally just a list of words, you take that word out of it, and then the system has to reprocess everything. And this time when it goes through the data, because that word is not on that list anymore, it will pick up every occurrence of that word in the data set, and it'll be as though it wasn't ignored to begin with. Yes? We'll ask the relativity expert on that.
Well,
or the other one in front.
actually, that's a question I don't have an answer to. I mean, the only thing that I know about how it's built is that we have the list of stop words that you can change. It's always a good idea to look at them if you have a word that you know is a pretty common word. And frankly, when you look at the list of stop words, some of them are a little bit of a surprise. Like there are words in there that you might not expect, but they are words that we use all the time. So then you think, well, it is a really common word. So just a word of caution to take a look at that list. If you have a word that you think might be important in your case, like over, or there's words like there and those, things like that.
And then we get to wildcards. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, yes. And you can have multiple indexes in a workspace. That's not a problem for DT search, but it will be only for that workspace.
Right. And you can choose then which index you're going to run your searches with. Another thing that although we've got this slide up, another thing that we've done before is, for instance, the colon character is oftentimes noise. It's ignored. But if you happen to be searching for the phrase from colon because you're trying to find particular embedded emails that are down the chain in the body of the email, then you can rewrite that index as well. Put the colon back into play, and it will get picked up as something that can be searched for. It's very painful. I don't recommend that you try it. However, here we go. Now we're talking about wildcards. There's 3 of them up there. How many people here are pretty comfortable with wildcards? Okay. How many people don't know what a wildcard is? Okay, we're in the mix. So wildcard is basically a character that you use, in this case, let's say the asterisk between food and drug, to represent one or more characters that you don't care about. In other words, if you have food asterisk drug, the thought behind that search term is, well, we'll get every instance of food and drug, right? There's food A and D, food ampersand, maybe there's food dash, N dash drugs. But if I put an asterisk in there, then I'm saying I don't care what's between food and drug, just get me every occurrence of food, characters, and drug. Why is that? First of all, does that make sense to everyone, that that's how this wildcard, this multi-character wildcard would work? So Why is that a bad search term up there? Why is that not going to be effective in finding every instance of food and drug, ampersands, hyphens, etc.? Any ideas? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, say that again? Wildcards can represent spaces. So the trouble with this is the asterisk can represent any number of characters. So it could be food, technically 1,000,000 characters, and drug. And that's not food and drug. That's food, blah, drug. Doesn't work very well. On the other hand, I think someone had already suggested this out here. If you did something along the lines of food within 2 of drug, that's something you're familiar with, that might be a better way to find references to food and drug.
I think that would be, that would absolutely be a better way, for
Yes,
sure.
so the internal, the internal wildcard that within a phrase is a really troublesome thing. It's something that we often do because we think it's a decent shortcut for capturing all variations on a theme. And pretty much every time it is so over-inclusive that if you ever see that, again, second thing you take away from here, don't do internal wildcards within phrases because that is, just a bad idea.
Now, there is a technique in DT search.
Tell us about that.
And we're gonna talk about that. I think in a couple of slides we have a list of some other methods of DT search, and one is to fill in characters that you think might be variations on spelling. Things like a question mark or a % sign, and we're going to get to some of that. But that would be better to use if you think there should be differences in spelling.
Tell me about the exclamation mark.
Well, the exclamation mark is right in that list of characters, the ampersand, the dash, the % sign, all of those things that are ignored in the DT search. So the exclamation mark is not going to be a good wildcard search.
You may have used it in Lexis and Westlaw, but you don't use it in DT search. And typically in most indexing engines and most search engines or SQL query engines and so forth, you don't use the exclamation. On the other hand, you have this tilde over here, this little wavy thing.
I love the tilde.
Okay, now, when a man says he loves the tilde,
First of all, I just like saying,
you have to give him the
I like
stage.
saying tilde, first of all, because that's just kind of fun. But this is used for finding variations of the word on the end, especially on the end of the word. So this is for stemming. If you want to find additional variations of a word, grammatical variations, not necessarily spelling variations.
So let's say we take the word drug and we put a tilde next to it or in front of it. What variations might that bring?
Oh, you might be drugstore. Well, yeah. Let's think of
drug, drugs,
drugs,
drag,
drugging,
drugging.
Yeah.
Depending on how
I don't
much.
know why you chose the word drug, but that's interesting.
Well, because it was food and drug, right?
I would be careful with stemming.
Say that again?
Yeah.
It's not as clever as you think it is.
Well, it's also not a replacement for spelling variations. It's just grammatical variations.
If you put in drink, it'll find drinked, but not drank.
Yes.
Yes, yes. So it's only going to put a suffix. It'll find the suffix as a word. It won't find,
Common ones like ED, ING,
Right.
stuff like that.
it won't find ran if you put in stem after run.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Thanks, Constantine.
But if you're looking for drug and drugs, it's a decent way to do it. Think about variations on your words. Oftentimes, going back to the point of being explicit versus implicit, it's way better if you know there are 3 variations you're looking for, and even though simplicity and elegance are a good thing, it's way better just to lay out those 3 words. If it's drug, drugs, or drugged, or drugging, just put that in exactly like that, and that's going to be a cheaper, better performing, and definitely more precise search than trying to use wildcards and not anticipating the overbreadth that some of that might bring with it. Okay, what's that? Anyone? Yes, ma'am. Okay, ringer over here. I'm going to stop asking you questions. Yes, this is Korean. So what do you do when you look at that? The first time I saw that, I said, well, we've got to find a native Mandarin speaker, naturally. And then I was told that's not even Mandarin, that's Korean. So How do we deal with special characters like that, Stan? What do we attorneys need to know about how to search in a different language, in a different character set?
One of the biggest recommendations that I would make is to get your stop word list in that language. Build your index based on that language, but find a stop word list. And there are stop word lists out there for every language. So you need to make sure that when you build your index, you include that stop word list. If you don't change it, then you're not going to get good results.
So I ran into that in a case where the documents were one half in English and one half in Korean, South Korean to be precise. Kidding. And so there you run into a situation where you've got to have English on your stop list, and you've got to have Korean on your stop list, and you've got to know how to translate every search that you're running, particularly if they're objective searches, they're people's names and so forth. Those are easy to translate, but you do have to have those in there. And then you have people who are switching back and forth within the same email, from Korean to English, back to Korean to English. And then, once in a while, why not throw in some Spanish or something else? The point there is, inspect your data set and be sure you know that it's all English before you decide all my keywords that I'm going to agree to are in English, because that's exactly what happened there. We agreed to keywords in English and then realized, nope, the few data samples that we'd seen were all in English, but 40% of this stuff is in Korean, and we had to come up with Korean search terms.
The ringer has a
All
question.
right. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
Well, no, you don't run language identification, but you look at metadata, and a lot of the metadata will tell you that. If you start looking at the froms and tos, for instance, and you sort them, on one end you'll get all these Korean symbols, on the other end you'll get A up through Z. Or you look at the subject lines, or in fact, just look at 100 random records on your screen, you go, whoops, there are some strange characters on here. It is fairly easy if you're looking at metadata and inspecting it without having to run a specific language tool to be able to spot those inaccuracies or those discrepancies.
But, running language identification certainly is, if you think you have a data set that may include various languages and you want to be able to isolate those, then certainly running language ID, it's a cost consideration depending on how you're using Relativity, what your subscription is, that kind of thing. Certainly something to be concerned about. But that would definitely work as well.
So this is a massive list, Stan?
It is
Are we
a
going to
massive
go
list.
through every single one of these?
No, we don't. We certainly don't have time. We're at half an hour already.
Right. So we'll point out some, right? We'll point
Yes.
out and, or, and not. Wildcards that we talked about, word stemming. Tell us about some of the other ones below that.
Well, I think a couple of them to point out. We talked about the stemming, so the fuzzy searching. When we mentioned that there were other wildcards, the % sign is a good one to use for fuzzy searching. If you're looking for variations on spelling. One of the examples that we use a lot in our documentation is the word apply. So if you have APP % LY, then it's going to look for all the variations in spelling that start with APP, but then have a variation after that. So wherever you put the % sign, it's going to look for the beginning words, the beginning letters, and then look for variations after that letter. The other one I like to point out is X last word and X first word. I think this is one that's really good to use but often overlooked. If you, for instance, want to look for a word that's within 25 words of the beginning word of the document, then you can search for X first word and make the X 25. So that's a really useful tool as well.
So the bottom line, I guess, is that there are lots of other more sophisticated ways to structure your searches, but everything begins right at the beginning with knowing how to do the simple searches and being as explicit as you can rather than relying on wildcards and so forth. But if you do need to get deeper, come find Stan and he'll tell you more about it.
Well, and this is a good thing, a good time to put in a plug for our not only our whole documentation site, but we have in there the quick reference guide, searching quick reference guide. So look that up, print it out, take it with you, keep it on your desk, because that has a lot of things like this that are quick little wins for searching.
Right. Okay, stop words, we've talked about this. These are words that may or may not be recognized by the system. Don't have to memorize this list. Just make sure you look at your stop words. We talked about stemming for a second there. Notice here, for instance, we took the word electricity and used DT search to say, okay, let's be a little fuzzy, fuzziness level of 4 out of 10. What other words come up that are similar to electricity? This helps you find misspellings of people's names, misspellings of words that might be used. So for instance, you can see electricity has been misspelled like electricity down there, 10 hits. Maybe one of those is a document that you care about, and you want to be able to include that in your explicit search terms.
Now, Niloy, if you
Yeah.
stay here for just a second, and we haven't pointed out the difference with the dictionary search. So when you're doing a search from the main search page, you can choose to do dictionary search, and that's where you can set your fuzziness level so that you can get this list. So all of these words would be contained in the dictionary in your index. But this being able to set the fuzziness level here will give you all the variations of that word.
And basically what this is telling you in your particular data set, not fixed across all data sets, but in your particular data set, what different kinds of words have been used or how the system has recognized words in different ways. Very useful, as I said, when finding misspellings and so forth. So now a small serving of philosophy. You know, segues are important. And here's the small serving of philosophy. What is a hit? What is a family? And what does it mean to be unique? Because every time we devise our searches and run our hit reports or have someone run hit reports for us, these are the questions we always get, right? From opposing counsel, we have these questions internally. We might ask them of our lit support specialists. And they tell you, you have X number of hits. And perhaps that's plain as day, perhaps that's gibberish. Then you hear about message families or threading families or other kinds of, apparently familial relations that your data sets are having. And then the key question always is, how many unique files, records, hits does this search term create, right? I've got 8 search terms, and I'm going to add a 9th one. I can easily figure out how many more that 9th one would create. On the other hand, I have 10 search terms, and I want to know, well, if you're telling me that these 10 search terms together bring back 1,000 emails, how many of those is because of this search term, and how many because of that one, and how many because of the other one? And I'm here to tell you that that is a philosophical question because it's impossible to answer. It really is impossible to answer. Why is it impossible to answer how many of these hits are, assigned to a single search term as opposed to overlaps?
Well, I'm not sure if it is
stumping
impossible
Stan.
to answer.
All right.
Because we're going to give you the unique hits, and we'll give you the unique hits by family or by relational field. Let's just call it that,
So
relational
take a look,
field.
think about a document. Say you've got your 5 search terms, let's say, and a particular document has 2 or more of those search terms on it. Okay? So that document is not in your search because of the first search term or the second or the third. It could be any one of those that brings it back, right? Because all 3 show up on that document. So when you're told what's unique, you're being told, essentially, here's a set of records that have this search term and only this search term. Let's say food and drug. Here are the unique hits of food and drug. These are documents that only have food and drug on them, none of the other search terms. Here are the search terms that only have the records that only have third party on them. That's unique. But then there's going to be an overlap between the two, right? There are going to be documents that have third party and food and drug. And those are not counted as unique in either situation. So if you were to say, how many unique hits or records are there from just these 2 search terms, you'd end up with a really small number. Say, oh, well, that's it. So I just add those 2. There's 5 for this, 7 for that. That's 12. I'm done. But no, the overlap is what you're missing. The overlap is records that have both search terms on it. So when you're asked, or when you wonder what is unique and, what impact a particular search term is having on your overall result set, it is not as simple as saying, how many unique records does this add? Because the overlap factor, when you have 10 or 15 or 20 different terms, the overlaps between each of the various sets and subsets, is something that if you ask lit support people to calculate for you, they probably shoot you in the head. Jane, would you shoot people in the head for asking you to figure those overlap? Never. I would. So worry less about breaking your search terms apart. When you have a hit report, focus instead on the fact that as a whole, this is what comes up, and some of the the numbers you'll get for each one of these searches will overlap with the ones above and below it, and see which ones are the heaviest hitters. Don't worry about whether one brought back 500 and another 400 when there's something that brought back 6,000. Those are the ones you want to fine-tune, and that's really important to do with your searches. You don't just set it and forget it, right? It's not Ron Popeil's Showtime Rotisserie Barbecue. Great product, by the way, but not what we're talking about today. What you want to do with your search terms is you want to get the hit reports back and see which ones are the heavy hitters, the biggest ones, or the smallest ones. Why do I care about the smallest ones? The ones that say a search term that returns 0 hits. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Stan?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends on the case, because you could have something that returns 1. That could be your best document. Either
or
the one that's going to win
0,
or lose your case, right?
Right. You search for whatever your key word is, harassment, let's say, and oftentimes we search for cuss words, right? Someone says, this manager wrote me an email with lots of swear words in it. Mm-hmm. And you search for those words and you get no hits. That's great. However, you might also go, maybe there's something wrong with my search, because you're telling me that nobody in this whole data set has ever used a swear word before. So look at both ends of your searches, your hits, to see, well, do we have a lot of hits? We've got to fine-tune those and bring those down. Do we have very few hits? Maybe there's something wrong with that search word. Okay, so here's an example of what I mean, right? So this is, you don't have to look at all this data. I'm just going to walk you through a couple of bits here. Let's take a look at the top first. Documents returned, 1,627. You can see there were 4 searches run: Irish Sun, Law, Politics and Donation, and Tech within 25 of Globex. It doesn't matter what those searches are. It's just that there were 4 searches run. You got 1,627 documents returned. In other words, 1,627 different files of electronic information had one or more of these searches. But notice there's documents containing search hits, 1,069. So there's a discrepancy between documents returned and documents containing search hits. What's that discrepancy?
Which one are you looking at again?
1627 versus 1069 at the top there. Documents returned versus documents containing search hits. A little something called family. So if the hit's on an attachment, or the hit's on the email, the attachment comes with it. You don't separate those, right? But those are 2 files. I've got the words that I'm looking for. Irish Sun maybe is in the email. The attachment doesn't have any of those words in it, but it comes back because it's part of the family.
Well, that's where the unique hits on the bottom can really come in handy when you look at unique family docs.
Right. Now look, so that's one thing you need to understand, why there's a difference between the number of search hits and the number of documents returned. Now you look at the bottom there, you can see some of those discrepancies. Again, Irish Sun, 10 documents with family 27. What does that mean? It means there were 10 emails or attachments, let's say in this hypothetical, that had the phrase Irish Sun in them. And they also had attachments to them or parent emails to them that raises the number to 27. The other thing to notice on here, you don't have to look at all the rest of these data here, is to notice that the sizes of these different sets of documents isn't consistent. They're not consistent. They're not even. The important thing, I think we all know intuitively, is that you don't know how large a particular email file is going to be. It depends on the attachments. Oftentimes, you don't know what the attachments are going to be. So trying to judge based on megabytes or gigabytes or kilobytes or some other measure of volume how much work that actually represents is a fool's errand. At the end of the day, you want to see how many records you're going to have to review, how many emails you're going to have to review, and while you don't know how many pages each one of those might be, that's probably a better way, and actually a far superior way to determine what your burden's going to be. But let's move forward. A life beyond keywords. So you have data, you have it in Relativity, and you can run DT search across it. But there's so much more you can do with DT search and really with any other search engine. And so tying yourself to keywords is really essentially saying, I have this, going back to this picture, I have this race car, I'm going to put it in first gear and I'm just going to, drive it down the block. Now, there's a lot more you can do. You just have to know what those options are. So for instance, up there, you've got something that says count of custodian. One of the first things you can do when you get your data set is see which custodians are represented in it. How many records do I have from custodians A through Z? Because you might decide that you care more about the emails or content in, say, Sally and Vincent's collection, or maybe in someone else's collection, than the others. And you might say, let's run keyword searches on just these 2 custodians, even though I have 10 or 12 custodians in my data set. You might also look to see what kind of native types of documents you have. In other words, you see there, how much email do I have? How many Word documents do I have? Excel, PowerPoint. The reason you care about that, again, is you may not want to run keyword searches against certain file types. There's rarely any benefit if you're looking for conversational content in running searches against Excel files. On the other hand, if you have particular Excel files that you're looking for, or content within Excel files, it might make sense to isolate those and review those using a different mechanism than keyword search. Point is that all of the records in your database are not homogeneous. You've got to think actively about whether or not you should be treating things differently on the basis of, is it a Word document, an Excel document, Acrobat? You might find, for instance, that there are audio files in there or video files in there. Of course, you're not going to run keywords on those, but you might be curious as to what those are. You might isolate all the audio files and see if any of those are voicemail. A lot of email systems now have the ability to put voicemail right into your, into your email inbox as an audio file. And you're not going to, if there is key content in there, and you're not searching by the person's phone number to see who sent the voicemail, you might miss out on that key information. So,
Neela, before you move on from that, just let me add, if you haven't interacted much yet with dashboards in Relativity, this is a great way. If you haven't run search terms yet, and you're saying, well, do I want to run search terms on everything? You can filter this as well right from the dashboard. And so let's say you want to click on Sally Beck's documents, but you just want to see how many of her documents are PowerPoints. Then you can select both of those and you'll create a filter that'll give you the exact numbers for multiple custodians or one or whatever it is. So you could use those filters whether you've run the search terms already or before you run the search terms.
Right. You can look to see what your date distribution is for your data set. Now, 2 interesting things on here. First off, you see that there's a cluster of information, looks like around the year 2000. What this tells you, if you look at your distribution of dates, is do I or do I not have all the data I expected? Is there a gap in my data? If I expected data from 2000 to 2008, and for some reason there's a 6-month or year-long gap in there, then you know that there's something wrong with your data set. So another way to analyze your data set and to see where most of the content lies. The interesting thing there is the email from the 1900s. Tell me about, Stan, about the 1/1/1900 email. Who was sending email in the year 1900?
Well, yeah, I would love to know that. I would like to know where that came from.
Yeah. So
or,
sometimes
what happened? Something's wrong with the date field?
Something's wrong with the date field,
changed the
something wrong with the
metadata?
data. But you find outliers like that. Maybe that's relevant information. Clearly, that email wasn't sent in 1900. But if you are then going to start limiting your searches by dates or what you're going to review by dates, you might miss out on those, and you have to know what those are. Okay. We don't have to get further into this. Let's just say there are more ways in which you can skin the cat. You can look to see, I think this is what you were saying earlier, look at your search terms and then see which custodians those search terms apply to, and that might help you figure out something about your data set that you didn't already know. Right. Boom, it gets even crazier. This is sender versus recipient domains. Does anyone here use domain analysis? Right, so you know what that is. Oftentimes, one of the first things we do at Littler when we're looking at data sets is we isolate everything that is internal only or internal versus information that's coming from the outside. Because if it's coming from the outside and you look at the domains and you say, okay, coming from CNN.com, coming from Slate, coming from MSNBC, Fox News, wherever else, Bloomberg, coming into you, those are probably, unless the circumstances warrant it, probably irrelevant and stuff that they can drop to the bottom of your review queue. Because you're not, even if the search terms show up on that data set, you don't care what CNN had to say about third-party food and drug unless that's somehow pivotal to your case, and it's probably not going to be. So you do this, and that's one way that you can separate spam or quasi-spam or less important data from valuable internal communications. The other thing you can do then is look at those domains and see, do you have Gmail in there, AOL, Yahoo, any of the, and there are lists available online, of email service providers in the cloud. Because then you can so zoom in on those and go, whose Gmail account is this? Who is, let's say, neeloyray@gmail.com, and why is he emailing company secrets outside? That might be worth knowing. So you may want to figure out where your data is leaking, outside of your closed environment. And this is one of the ways you can do that. So for instance, up here you can see that there are, in fact, one more point I'll show you is you'll see there's milbank.com and brobeck.com, and I know Milbank is a law firm, so again, I might immediately think, okay, that's either privileged information or otherwise more sensitive information. KS Law, another law firm. Things like that you can pick up. On the other hand, Hotmail, I might want to look and see whose Hotmail account is implicated. Baylor.edu, I'm guessing someone went to Baylor or has Baylor affinity and is getting, news reports. Probably not that relevant. But there are ways that you can prioritize by looking at these things.
And then go in there and do a sample. Let's say you want to see Hotmail, and
Sure.
then just run a sample. So you click on the Hotmail, you get all the Hotmail documents back, and you realize overwhelming majority is just fantasy football emails. You don't really care, so you can set those aside.
Right.
So,
And then when you're reviewing within Relativity, it's really important to know that you can see all the metadata on a record. So your use of metadata doesn't stop at the search stage, right? Once you're actually reviewing documents in whatever linear manner you're doing it, look at the email metadata, look at the file metadata, see what you can tell from things like, for instance here, well, I guess we don't have tremendously good choices here, but you may, for instance, find that the author field or the file title or something else along those lines triggers an understanding. I'll give you an example. We had a resume produced to us that the guy swore up and down was created while he was at work. That was his resume. It was important that the resume be dated to the time that he was fired from his job. When we inspected the metadata of that, we noticed that the company field was filled in. That's the field that says who bought this piece of software and to whom it's licensed. And that was this individual's current employer, not his former employer, not the people we were representing. So we were immediately able to say to him, isn't it true that you actually created this on your new company's laptop? Of course he had. But you wouldn't know that if you hadn't inspected the metadata to realize that it wasn't created on that other system. All right, let's get past metadata search. Email threading. Say anything about email threading?
well, there's
Do
one,
it.
do it all the time, do it early and often. And now you can run multiple email threading sets in Relativity. I want to let you know that. And also we have foreign language headers capability now. We have English, we have French and German are both available now, right?
German's coming out.
German's not ready yet. French is out.
So the bottom line
but we'll be rolling out multiple languages. So those of you who have had that concern in the past, that's one thing that you can do. But yeah, do email threading.
The bottom line on email threading is if you have 5 emails, say Stan and I are writing back and forth about how great this presentation is going to be, you might have all 5 or 6 or 7 of those emails in your data set, but you don't need to review each one of them. You may only need to review that last one that contains within its body all of the other 6.
Yeah.
So when you use email threading, you're basically trying to find all of the terminal emails, the emails that together form a spanning set. In other words, a subset of emails that contains all the information, and so you don't have to look at the rest of the bits and pieces of those threads. And that's really powerful in reducing the volume of what you have to review.
Absolutely. The important thing about this is the inclusive emails. That will really give you an indication of how many emails you're going to have to review. Like Neeloy said, if you're looking only at inclusive emails, you're going to see all the text, all the unique text that's in those emails. And that chart would give you a breakdown to know why that email is inclusive, whether it's because the attachments are different on 2 emails or the text itself. So it's important for planning purposes.
All right, real quickly,
Yeah.
this is you.
So which is the right one?
What are the differences?
Usually, DT search, if you're not using analytics, DT search is really the way to go. I think we've talked about DT search mostly, and I would suggest using DT search almost all the time. And we're going to talk a little bit about analytics in a minute, we want to make sure we get in some plugs for searching using analytics as well.
Go ahead.
Do you have
Let's talk
anything
about
else to
analytics.
say about
Nope.
keyword expansion?
Let's talk about analytics.
All right, go ahead. Keyword expansion,
Oh, do you want me to go back?
concept search.
Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Keyword expansion, concept searching, and finding similar documents. 3 areas we want to hit. Who is pretty familiar with analytics, concept analytics in Relativity? Anybody use it? A few? It's kind of hesitant, like, yeah, a little bit. Another thing, we say, okay, use email threading on everything. Use concept analytics on everything too. A lot of people think concept analytics is just if you're going to do predictive coding, right? There are a lot of analytics features that are great for searching your documents, and you do not have to worry about setting up a big assisted review project. I don't want to make assisted review sound like it's unapproachable, but you can do simple concept searching to find some key documents. Let's say, for instance, this is a good example. If you meet with your client and the client says to you, I know that there was a conversation that I had with the CFO of the company sometime early last year, and it was by email. So on the left there you have what we call the isness. These are things you know about what you're looking for. What are you searching for? You're searching for an email to or from the CFO and your client sometime early last year, and it's an email. You know that then that the conversation of those emails is something about price modeling. Well, chances are, if somebody's talking about price modeling, they're not going to use those exact words, right? How often do you say, I want to have a conversation with you about price modeling, or whatever the subject is? If you're in that industry, you use your industry's lingo. And that lingo may include all kinds of things other than those exact words. So you can start with narrowing your search to what you do know, for sure, the isness, and you can filter down with all those things that Niloy was just showing, and then do a concept search for things about price modeling. Values of concept search include things like this. So who's from outside Chicago? Yes, great. How many people say the pop if you're referring to Coke? Okay, Chicagoan? Michigan? Or how about soda? People say soda more often? I had an uncle from Texas who said sody pops. I don't know if anybody says sody pop. But in Chicago, we say pop, right? But if you're looking for documents around some kind of carbonated beverage, you see that people will use different words, right? So if you set up a keyword search or a DT search and all you use is the word pop, you're not necessarily going to find the documents that talk about soda. So using concept searching, you can find some of those documents where they might not use the exact words because your concept index will have placed documents together that have the same concepts and a variation of words, because the words around those may be similar. They're all going to talk maybe about carbonated beverages or sweetness or whatever it is that bring those together. And eventually, you'll start to learn these words do go together. Right. The same thing with code words. This is a great one. If somebody is trying to commit fraud.
Right, if someone's trying to commit fraud and they decide that they're going to use the word Mickey Mouse to refer to every time that they meet somewhere, or Michigan, I think we had one that said Miami of Ohio hockey was their code word for let's go outside and plan how to start our rival business. Mm-hmm. You're not going to pick up on that because you won't know those code words. But when you set up a concept search and you're looking for instances of people gathering or meeting, and you start seeing that a lot of these meetings are about Miami of Ohio hockey or about Mickey Mouse or whatever else, then you know there's a keyword. And what you can do then is you don't stop there. You find that keyword, you go, this is interesting, and then you run a keyword search for that phrase, and you discover their plans to meet at the Applebee's outside of the office. And literally, I'm not making this up. They'd meet at the Applebee's whenever the Miami of Ohio hockey sign went up, and they'd talk about how to steal the business from the company. Caught them, though.
So. That's why sometimes you do have to be careful if you say, oh, these emails are only about fantasy football or something, because there might be something there.
Concept search will reveal,
you know what,
there's something weird about these. It's not really about fantasy football. We don't think it's exactly that. So
So take your search and put it into a concept search. And the great thing about it is you can be as specific or as general as you like. But just like if you're talking to a human, the more specific your search is in a concept search, the more likely you're going to get better results. If you say to somebody in your office, I would like for you to organize my files, and that's it. Well, that person may not organize those files exactly as you want, right? But if you say organize them by date or organize, so the more specific you get is the same thing with a concept search, the better off you're going to be. And it's going to take that search that you submit and plug it into that concept index and return the documents that are around it. Okay? It's all about spatial relationships in the concept index.
Use your specialists. They're the ones who know how to do this best, but know
They
that this
do.
is something you can do.
So this is just an example of what it looks like. At the top there, the box, you can plug anything you want. The main emphasis I think we want to have here is that you can make up a concept search just from your head, copy and paste it from a memo, or from your client, or from somebody on the case team, something like that, or just right out of a newspaper article. I like to tell people, look, what is the best thing that could happen to your case? Plug that, what you think would be the best thing for your case, into a concept search and see what you get back. Or do the flip as well. What would be the worst document you could possibly find? Just type out that language and put it in a concept search.
Yeah, think about attorneys who draft memoranda of instructions, right? Where you tell your reviewers what it is they're looking for, what's going to be hot,
Yes.
hot good, hot bad, and so on and so forth. Take the extra step of just taking that very language you've written in that memo and put it into a concept search, and you might be able to unearth a lot of these documents even before people have gone in. Okay.
Now here we just want to point out how you can search for similar documents within the document viewer. So if you're looking at a document and you think, I want to see more documents just like this one, conceptually, then just right-click there. You have to have an index built. But just right-click, and then you can choose Find Similar Documents from your Analytics index. Now, keep in mind here that this document search will only look for documents as a whole. So it's not looking for specific, even if you highlight text within that document and then choose Find Similar, it's only going to search for concepts like the whole document, not individual phrases.
Right.
And keyword expansion, it's another concept index search. This is a great one to just expand your list of keywords. We talked about setting up a keyword search earlier. You could plug your keyword search here into a keyword expansion and find other words that are conceptually like the words you already have in your keyword search. That's good timing.
It is good timing.
Now we say go out and search with confidence, right?
Anyone know what movie that is? I'm sure you do. Come on.
Oh,
Bruce
good.
Almighty.
You knew
give
that
the
right
man
away.
a door prize. Give the man a door prize, yes. Don't do what he did. What he was doing there literally was answering every letter or email that God ever got. And I believe he ran out of patience,
Yeah.
electricity, and storage space, and created just an information governance nightmare. But there's a different session on IG that you can go to and figure out how to solve that. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for listening patiently and playing along.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ball, thank you for being here. And the
There's
rest
one
of you,
more.
go out and search with
Questions,
confidence.
yes. We didn't leave a lot of time for questions, but we're here.
I faced an issue a couple of weeks ago with a client where the client wanted to search for 20%. Numbers 20 and percent sign. Obviously, percent is an operator
Yep.
and not something that's indexed. And DJ doesn't index numbers. How would you go about searching for 20%?
You can search numbers in DT search, but you do have to make the percent sign searchable. And there is a way to do that. You just have to remove it from the list
Stop noise list.
of ignored and then add it to your alphabet file. So we have on our website, there's a recipe on how to do that. So look that up if you need any help with that. We're always there.
Does that then defeat the ability to use percentage as an operator? Or you have to put it in
It'll still be able to, you can still use it as a wild card. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, right. They told us they were going to turn up the heat.
Probably more of a question for Stan and
Constantine ran away before we got to questions. Sure.
So, you guys talked about the difference between keyword and DT search, right? And how DT search is in general much more robust and you've got more options in terms of connectors and blockers and all that sort of thing. But DT search also has to be built in each workspace, right? And then public
Correct.
and it's not automatically updated when you add documents for workspace. You have to do it on your build.
Yes. Well, I wish I had. You'll have to talk to the developers about that. I'm not absolutely the best. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I wish
Part of it has to do with performance.
it is
And,
performance related.
drag on the system. If you're going to imagine the entire database and documents are getting added, every index is being rebuilt every time a document's added, makes more sense to have a... I know this question wasn't for me.
It didn't sound indignant, by the way. It didn't sound indignant, but it does have to do with performance, and the way you run your DT search indexes also is based on performance. So one thing to keep in mind along those lines is when you add fields to a workspace and you want those fields to be indexed, you'll need to, when you create a field, I don't know how many people in here actually create fields, but when you do, you have to choose include in text index in order for that field to be included, especially in a template workspace. So if you're going to use that workspace and make it a template for other workspaces, that has to be included in the text index.
So everyone gets Stan's email address, and anytime
Solutions
you have a
at
question,
I almost said Kekira. Solutions@relativity.com.
and he will find you the answer, because there is an
That's
answer.
true. Yeah.
All right. If there are no more questions,
Okay.
thank you, everyone, for being patient with us, and see you around.
Thank you.